if she wants to be this stubborn about her labor and not getting Pitocin or an epidural, then she's in for a rude awakening with breastfeeding because she's not going to be able to breastfeed. And I was like, whoa, wait, what? And she goes, she's 36 weeks and has gestational diabetes. She's not going to be able to make milk.
I'm Jaimie Zaki, IBCLC and Mama 5, and this is the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast, where pregnant and new mothers learn how to prepare for and overcome breastfeeding challenges without being controlled by stress, fear, and anxiety. Each week, we'll answer your questions, share breastfeeding success stories, and inspire you to shut out the toxic whispers of the world and embrace your God-given intuition to make confident breastfeeding decisions. Let's dive in.
Hey, howdy, hey, Mama Bear. Jaimie here with the Breastfeeding with Confidence podcast. And today we are going to talk about avoiding unnecessary formula in the hospital. Now, everyone I talk to, talks about how they want to exclusively breastfeed, of course, but they'll use formula if it's necessary. But they really want to avoid it if it's not necessary. The problem with this, how do you, as a first-time mom, know if formula is necessary? If your plan is to just rely on your doctors and nurses, I hate to break it to you, but this is not a plan for success. Did you know that 80% of moms in America start out breastfeeding? By about 6 months old, only about 25% of them are still exclusively breastfeeding. We have really poor exclusive breastfeeding rates in our country, and this is a problem. This isn't because American women are broken. This is because we have a support issue. You should also know that in the first 48 hours, 20% of women are given formula. That means in the first 2 days in the hospital, 20% of those 80% who started out breastfeeding are given formula. So I'm not talking about the 20% that chose not to breastfeed. I'm talking about of the 80% who wanted to breastfeed, 20% are given formula in the first 48 hours. Y'all, this is a problem because most of the time, in the first 48 hours, formula is not necessary. And when it is given in a volume that is too high for that baby. It is more than what that baby needs, which starts a whole cycle of issues that I am not going to spend time on today. We can talk about why to avoid formula another day. But right now we're talking about the fact that we want to avoid formula. How do we do it? Before I go any further in this episode, I want to remind you that this episode is for educational purposes only. This is for you to learn, for you to have a diving board to bounce off of to start learning more. And this is for you to learn, just things to start researching and learning more about. This is not to tell you an exact plan for you and your baby because every scenario is different, every situation is different, and I am a lactation consultant, but I am not your lactation consultant yet. So if you want a more personalized plan for avoiding formula, I am so happy to help you with that. If you want to go to my website, littlebearlactation.com, and reach out for setting up a virtual consult, we can work on that together. But I don't want you to take anything that I say in this podcast as a specific plan for you and your baby because there could be unique things as you'll learn as we go through. All right, so we talked about the statistics and how many women are pushed to use formula when they don't want to, but not so much when they don't want to. They might not even actually need to. But how do you know? You really need to be equipped to know the difference, to be able to discern when to use formula and when to avoid it, when it's safe to say yes, when it's safe to say no. Even if you are giving birth at a baby-friendly hospital, you never know who the nurse you're going to get is and whether or not she's going to be supportive. So let me start by telling you a story about one of my doula clients back in the day. I've attended a lot of births as a doula and lactation consultant, so I have seen a wide variety of support and experiences at the exact same facilities. And it's always completely dependent on the specific nurse and team that is there that day. So I had this client who she went into labor early. It was 36 weeks exactly. She had gestational diabetes and she was, she had a kind of a long, difficult labor, which is normal for a first time mom, but she had wanted to avoid Pitocin and she did for a very long time. And then she eventually agreed to a little bit, but it was on her terms. And I'm there to support her making her decisions, right? The nurse did not like that. And so I had stepped out of the room for a bit to give the mom and dad some privacy. I went and grabbed a cup of coffee, came back, do that from time to time just to give parents their space during labor. And her nurse pulled me aside in the hallway and started berating me, telling me, she it wants to be stubborn about Pitocin. She could have had her baby by now. Why does this impact breastfeeding? I'll tell you in a second. She's like going on about she could have had her baby by now if she would just listen. And if she wants to be this stubborn, listen to this. She literally said if she wants to be this stubborn about her labor and not getting Pitocin or an epidural, then she's in for a rude awakening with breastfeeding because she's not going to be able to breastfeed. And I was like, "Whoa, wait, what?" And she goes, she's 36 weeks and has gestational diabetes. She's not going to be able to make milk. You can't make milk at 36 weeks. And when you have gestational diabetes, you need formula. And she's not going to like it, but she's going to have to deal with it. And you better tell her. And I got real mad in that moment. As a doula, you're supposed to kind of like play this line of communication and support, but like you're not above the nurses or whatever. And I kind of hate it because it shouldn't be a hierarchy thing at all. But putting it that way, like the doula responds to or answers to the nurse is always a problem because the doula answers to the parents. And that's always been my philosophy is I answer to my clients. I don't answer to the nurse. I'm happy to work as a team with the nurse. Hear what their concerns are and relay that to my client in a way that makes sense and that she can understand. I'm happy to be a bridge in communication, but I don't stand for abusive care. And that's what this nurse had been providing the entire night. And this is at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I've freaking had it, you know? I've had it with her pushiness on the whole Pitocin thing. And then she said this, that she said that my client's not going to be able to make breast milk. Like, it's just a freaking blatant lie. It's just not even true. Could she be at risk for more challenges with breastfeeding because she has gestational diabetes and her baby is preterm? Yes, she might face more risks. But no, she's not incapable of making breast milk. No, she's not going to be required to use formula. And this nurse went on about some crazy thing about their policy about not being allowed to breastfeed or something. And I'm like, "This is a baby-friendly hospital, isn't it?" And she's like, "Yeah, but that doesn't matter." And I was like, yeah, it actually does matter, first of all, because you have policies around how you handle this, and I promise you, if you're a baby-friendly hospital, your policy is not that she's not allowed to try to breastfeed," which is what she was claiming. And I told her, like, "You clearly don't know what you're talking about, and that's fine. You don't have to, but you don't get to tell lies because you have chosen not to learn about breastfeeding, not to learn how to support it. Um, this is not your hospital policy, and it's sad that I know your hospital policy better than you, but you better not speak about breastfeeding to her while she's still in labor. Let her get through her labor. We'll deal with the breastfeeding issue later, but you're going to need to stay out of it." Um, a lot of people would say, as a doula, that's not my role. Um, but I don't stand for liars. So I went back into the room where the midwife was. So there was a CNM at this hospital who was a midwife, very natural birth friendly, very breastfeeding friendly. And I pulled her to the side and told her about the conversation in the hallway. And she flipped her lid. Like, this apparently had been an ongoing issue with this particular nurse. And she was, obviously like, "That is definitely not our hospital policy. Like, you did the right thing. You were right. Thank you for putting her in her place because somebody needs to, and everybody here is afraid to. Again, perks of not answering to the hospital, right? Um, and that was kind of the situation that made me realize it doesn't matter if it's a baby-friendly hospital. It doesn't matter what your birth plan says, and it doesn't really matter how prepared you think you are. If you get that nurse who is just a bully, just isn't supportive, or just doesn't know what she's talking about, that can derail your entire breastfeeding relationship because you're going to default to her. You're going to. It's reasonable and logical that you're going to. And even if you don't, even if you do push back, you're exhausted and emotional and you're going to start questioning yourself. Nobody should have to go through fighting with somebody that's supposed to be on their team. So, how do you know if formula is necessary or not when you don't have a super feisty lactation consultant doula by your side fighting for you in the hallway? I'm glad you asked. While I may not be there in the hospital with you, I am here, and hopefully my voice is with you and my spirit is with you. There are 4 reasons why formula is often pushed in the hospital, 4 top reasons. So the first is weight loss, the second is latching trouble, third is jaundice, and fourth is gestational diabetes. Okay, so I'm gonna go do a quick rundown of each of these situations. I'm already 11 minutes in here and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to try and keep this under 20 minutes for you. So let's kind of touch on each of these topics and I'll let you know where you can get more information if you need more support and guidance. So, first of all, weight loss. You need to understand what normal weight loss is and strategies for increasing milk transfer for your newborn. So, if you join Latching with Confidence, you get access to the Confident Mama Bear Society, where I have workshops that break all of this down for you in detail. However, I'm going to touch on as much of it as I can right now. So, right now, what you need to know is that when you get IV fluids in labor, that can skew your baby's weight higher than it actually is, which means when they check their weight the next day, it's going to seem as if they've lost a lot of weight because they have to pee out all of that fluid. So, a lot of times, if you have had IV fluids, you have a long induction, you have a C section, we like to go by the 24-hour weight. Going based off that 24-hour weight can be a little more just accurate and a little more reflective of your baby's actual weight without the fluids skewing everything. Now, we don't like to see, a higher than 10% ish weight loss, but again, we've got to put it in the context of your labor and of the whole picture. So if you are pretty close to 10%, and you had a lot of fluids in labor, that doesn't mean that your baby's lost way too much weight and now you have to be like on edge, going crazy, making sure they get more. We just need to start implementing strategies like, just frequent feeding, maybe hand expression and hands on nursing, different things to increase milk transfer. The next issue that often results in somebody pushing formula is latching trouble. And two things I hear all the time is either the baby is too small to latch or can't open their mouth wide enough to get on the breast. And this drives me insane because it's actually really unlikely that your baby is too small to latch. There are preemies that are capable of getting a deep and functional latch. I have personally held a 4-pound baby in my hand and helped her mom breastfeed, and she latched beautifully and gained weight insanely fast. Why? Because we worked with her feeding reflexes. And most of the techniques nurses use for helping moms breastfeed are not working with their feeding reflexes, but rather against them. This means that the baby can have a really hard time opening their mouth wide enough because they aren't being properly supported, and then it just snowballs. That's why the first lesson inside of Latching with Confidence immediately teaches you how to work with your baby for a good, deep latch from the start. Common challenge number 3 that can often result in unnecessary formula is jaundice. And this one gets controversial. I could do a whole episode on jaundice and when jaundice is a problem, when jaundice is not, and maybe I'll do that one day. But right now, I want you to just hear this. Jaundice is often a reason that moms are told they need formula because the thought process is jaundice is cleared by more frequent bowel movements. So, formula in some people's mind would increase the volume, therefore, increase bowel movements, clearing the jaundice more quickly. The reality is that it's actually a lot more nuanced than this. And I don't usually cite the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine for everything. I don't love all of their protocols. However, their jaundice protocol is really interesting because it specifically says that formula is contraindicated in many situations and can risk making jaundice worse. So, if you are dealing with a jaundice situation before starting formula, I think it's really important that you look at the ABM protocol, you meet with an IBCLC, and you get your IBCLC and pediatrician discussing options to manage the jaundice without interrupting breastfeeding if that is at all possible. There is always going to be an outlying situation where formula is necessary. However, it is not the go to answer like some people will try to make it seem. Now, in the beginning of this episode, I told you about my client whose nurse said that she would not be able to breastfeed because of gestational diabetes. Here's the deal. Gestational diabetes obviously increases your risks, right? It increases challenges, increases certain risks. And gestational diabetes obviously involves a degree of insulin resistance, which is known to have a correlation with milk supply issues. However, this is not a hard fast rule. And most women with gestational diabetes can and do successfully breastfeed. However, the bigger issue is that when your baby is born after gestational diabetes, they have a higher risk of their own blood sugar issues. So they will need to be closely monitored for low blood sugar. And depending on your nurse, the hospital, the general situation, you could be encouraged to use formula to avoid or fix blood sugar issues. But you need to know that you have options. So, because this is such an important issue, I'm actually going to do an episode on this that dives deep with a labor nurse who specializes in gestational diabetes. Her name is Sarah, and she is a great resource on this. So, I'm not going to go deep on it today, but these are the few things I want you to remember and take home with you if you cannot wait for this episode to drop on gestational diabetes. If you manage your blood sugar well, and you learn strategies for effective breastfeeding, you will likely be able to avoid needing to supplement at all. Prenatal hand expression is a great way to collect colostrum during pregnancy, and then you have that as an option to supplement with instead of formula. If you need more information on all of this and you cannot wait for the episode to drop because you're like giving birth next week, I do have it all laid out in the Avoiding Formula workshop that's inside the Confident Mama Bear Society. And that brings me to my next point that I want to make sure that you know when you join Latching with Confidence, you don't just get an on demand class that teaches you stuff you could have Googled. You actually get access to an expertly curated hub of breastfeeding resources that I personally created after listening to dozens of women struggle with the same things over and over. Tell me the same stories. And all of them say, I wish somebody told me that sooner when I showed her the techniques that are featured in Latching with Confidence. Mama, whether you are pregnant and want to set yourself up for success, or your baby's already here and you're frustrated that you can't quite figure this thing out, Latching with Confidence can help. I walk you through how to work with your baby for a better latch, how to use holistic methods to heal your nipples if they're damaged, how to know what's normal versus what's a red flag, and how to advocate for support. Most importantly, you also get a free month of access to the Confident Mama Bear Society, where you can go even deeper, bringing your questions to our online community, coming to live support calls, and diving into bonus workshops, just like avoiding formula, just like what we've talked about today, to help you enjoy breastfeeding from the start. Mama, you deserve to enjoy breastfeeding from day one, and I'm here to help make that your reality. Visit littlebearlactation.com/latching with confidence to learn more and to join us. I hope to see you in there.
All right, Mama Bear, that is a wrap for today. If this episode helped you feel a little more confident or a little more prepared for breastfeeding, can I ask you a quick favor? Go ahead and leave me a review. It helps other moms find this podcast and join us in this amazing community of fierce and confident Mama Bears. And hey, if you know a friend who could use some encouragement or real talk about pregnancy, breastfeeding, and all things motherhood, share this episode with her. You've got this, Mama Bear. Trust your instincts, stay fierce, and I'll catch you in the next episode.